Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me on. Okay, and today, ABx Group, our purpose is delivering materials for a cleaner future. My background, I'm an engineer, spent most of my career in Rio Tinto and CSIRO, and then ABx since the beginning of 2020. Next slide, please. The standard disclaimer. And so ABx has three parts. The first two are the ones I'm going to talk about today. That is rare earth exploration in Tasmania. The second one is developing a process to recycle industrial waste into valuable chemicals. The third one is smaller now. That's where we started. It's bauxite exploration and mining. We still mine bauxite, but we don't invest in it. Next slide. So rare earths. Next slide. So the important thing, we know the rare earth market is growing. The reason for that is the permanent magnets. These are essential for electric vehicles and wind turbines. That's 90% of the value of the market. And those permanent magnets need four rare earth elements shown on the right, NdPr and DyTb. They're the four that matter. Next slide. And there's different types of rare earth deposits. On the left is the Mount Weld deposit in Western Australia. And all of the value from that deposit comes from the NdPr, that lime green, that's 25% of the volume of the rare earths, but 100% of the value. On the right is the breakdown of rare earths in ABx's clay deposit in Tasmania. And the big difference is there's more of the heavy rare earths, including yttrium, and specifically this DyTb, the teal green. Although that's only a small percentage of the rare earths, it's about 4%, it's half the value of the deposit. And virtually all of the world's DyTb comes from clay deposits, and these are currently virtually only mined in China. So the world is looking for more clay deposits outside of China in order to have a more secure supply and a larger supply of Dy and Tb. Next slide. So in Tasmania, our main rare earth exploration is about 40 kilometres west of Launceston. We've been active with bauxite exploration and mining in this area for over 10 years. So we know the area, we know which areas are amenable for mining, which aren't. Northern Tasmania is generally actually quite favourable for mining. Our leases are close to major highways, pretty close to major ports. We've exported bauxite out of the Bell Bay port previously, and most of our rare earth exploration leases are on commercial forestry plantations. So again, it's fairly straightforward to get land access. And we have a mixture of leases, some of which were legacy ones from our bauxite. We then deliberately looked for rare earths on those, and now we've got new leases specifically for rare earths. Next slide. Now, we know for when you're exploring for resources, you want tons and you want grade. The one thing to take from this slide is for these clay rare earth deposits, you want good metallurgy. And the blue line, just remember, a very steep blue line, if you have to add more acid to extract the rare earths out of your ore, your cost goes up enormously to the point where the value of the cost of the chemicals is more than the value of the product. And what our work has shown, and looking at the work of others, is that the ABx resource currently is the only one in Australia that has the low-cost metallurgy. And so it looks like at this stage, we'd be at the very low end of the cost curve and certainly lower than others. And that's a really differentiating feature for us and why you should consider looking at us seriously. Next slide. And so our plan is to, over the next 6 to 12 months, continue drilling to expand the size of the resource, do more metallurgy work to understand how we're going to extract the rare earths out of the ore, start to estimate capital cost and operating costs, and critically, discussions with customers. The rare earth supply chain is relatively small, especially outside of China. Everyone knows it needs to grow, but you really need support throughout the supply chain to get new projects up. So we're in regular discussions with multiple customers that can take our products. So that's the rare earth story. Next slide. The next one's a bit different. This is a chemical technology to recycle a waste. Next slide. And this is actually why I first joined ABx 3 years ago, before we even knew about the rare earths. And the context here is aluminium fluoride is an essential chemical for aluminium smelting. Without it, you cannot run a smelter. You'd be looking at shutting it within a week or two. There's no substitute. And most of the world is relatively self-sufficient. So if you have a part of the world like Quebec, where they make a lot of aluminium, they have an aluminium fluoride plant to supply that chemical. Australia is the largest aluminium producing region in the world without its own local supply of aluminium fluoride. So we have to import all of it. We always have. And of course, it mostly comes from China. So there's a significant incentive to start production here. That's currently not economically viable because you need fluorine. That comes from fluorspar, is the ore. Australia has limited fluorspar, and none of it is mined. They're not very good quality deposits. So we've got a problem. How do we get fluorine economically here? What we identified is ironically, the aluminium industry itself is producing an increasing amount of waste material that contains a lot of fluorine. So then the obvious idea, on paper is, well, can we take that waste, get the fluorine out of it, and use it to make aluminium fluoride and sell it back to the same customer? The next slide. That's what we've done. So on the right, you have an aluminium smelter. It produces this waste called aluminium smelter bath. It's actually sort of excess flux from the process. We've developed the Alcor process, which is a chemical process. We extract the fluorine out of it as as hydrogen fluoride, and convert that to aluminium fluoride and sell it back to the smelter. The process also produces a couple of co-products, which are also industrial chemicals with significant Australian and global markets. So in the end, you take a waste and you produce all products from it with no new waste material. Next slide. So when you're trying to develop a new process, it's all about scale up. You can't just walk up and build $1 billion or $100 million plant. It's too risky. So we've done the laboratory work on the left. We're now moving to the pilot plant stage, where you test the engineering of the process. What's your reactor design going to look like? What materials are you going to make it out of? We're just about to place orders for the significant components of that pilot plant. That's basically a year-long project to build, commission, and then run the pilot plant. And so the idea is, by this time next year, we'll have the pilot plant have demonstrated that the process works well enough for us to commit to building the next stage. When you look at the market situation on the far right, the ideal plant size, we think, in Australia is a single plant of 20,000 tonnes a year of aluminium fluoride production. That would supply about 80% of the Australian market, but it's only 2% of the global market, so it's no threat to anyone. But to get to that point from the pilot plant to that commercial plant is a big step up. It's 150 times bigger, which is risky in an engineering sense. So at the moment, we're proposing interim stage, what we call commercial stage 1, which will still be in Tasmania, be cash positive, but the capital cost payback will be longer. But to support that, just over 12 months ago, we received a $7.5 million grant from the federal government's Modern Manufacturing Initiative, and that supports both the pilot plant and the first commercial plant effectively on a one-to-one basis. So we need to match that funding. So all the aluminium companies are really interested in what we're doing. I know them all, been working with them for a long time. They say, Mark, yes, we need you to get up and running to take our waste, and we're very interested in a new lower cost source of aluminium fluoride. And those discussions are progressing quite well, to the point it's plausible that we could get an aluminium company to invest in us. So really, this is quite a distinctive opportunity, a stable market, a clear prospect to produce a chemical at lower cost and in a more environmentally friendly way by using a waste material. And in Australia, it's replacing imports. So it's a great opportunity to participate in an exciting new technology. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I've got plenty of questions for you. This first one a little bit technical. So look, you made significant progress on the company's project since we last spoke, in particularly, obviously, the rare earth assets. You recently announced the results from the latest round of assays, which have now increased the mineral resource estimates by 30% to 27 million tonnes. What do the assay results tell you about the continuity of the permanent magnet rare earth oxides?
Well, so I guess two things spring to mind. One is the spatial extent looks pretty large. You know, we've got some results. Well, our resource is at what we call deep leads and rubble mound. We've got other assay results previously from what we call windbreak, which is 16 kilometers away. So logically, you go, well, let's drill in between. And the more we do, the more it appears continuous. You know, it may well be that mineralization extends right the way through between the two. We're also understanding more about the variation more locally. So it definitely does vary. You know, you get some very high results, some lower results. But overall, it's saying the potential resource looks pretty significant.
And in addition to the resource upgrades, we also know that the overall grade has improved. Why is this, and can you see this type of improvement continuing?
Yeah, that's a good question, whether that's a sort of how coincidental that is. I think it's real because a lot of our original results were based off assays from old bauxite holes, which actually didn't go, because we were looking for bauxite at the time, they didn't go deep enough to go right through the rare earth layer. So we're gradually drilling new rare earth holes that are deeper, and so, you know, replacing the old data from the bauxite holes with that, and I think that is leading to higher average grades. As well as that, through more drilling and understanding of the geology, we're identifying, you know, we call hotspot areas, which, you know, are areas of even higher grade. And we think that's really important, because what's most important here is that you find a big enough resource of high grade and good metallurgy. That's more important than just finding a massive resource of mediocre grade and poor metallurgy.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And how much further has the recent results improved your understanding of the geological conditions?
Yeah, I think quite a lot. I mean, Ian Levy's our geologist. It's not me, but certainly he, you know, we are developing more and more robust hypotheses of how these formed, and therefore where are the best areas. And so our drilling is definitely about developing an understanding, not just about making the resource as big as we can, as quickly as we can. You know, so for example, our recent drill holes were actually spaced out far enough that, you know, there's gaps in the middle that we couldn't include in our resource estimate. So when we go back and infill those, the resource estimate will go up. The purpose of those was really to be understanding and to confirm our theories about where the best resources lie.
Yeah, gotcha. And how do the recent assay results compare to grades seen from other Australian listed explorers?
I'd say broadly speaking, the grades we've got are similar to what others are in Australia. Said that the big difference is the metallurgy. So the metallurgy varies enormously. And we would say there's, in fact, the majority of others, it looks like the metallurgy is very challenging. There's some overseas that are Australian listed where the grades is a bit higher. But again, you start having jurisdiction issues. You know, so within Australia, a fantastic jurisdiction, our grades are comparable and our metallurgies are the best, is our view at the moment.
Got you. And then let's talk about your aluminium fluoride business, Alcor, has also progressed. What can investors expect next from this opportunity?
Yeah, the next 12 months, it's definitely about the pilot plant. So that's build it this year, commission it early next year, and run it, you know, have run it significantly by mid-year. And that's, you know, we expect that will show, yes, you know, the process works in a chemistry sense, but it also works in the engineering sense. And, you know, the other big thing would be great if we can achieve it, we're certainly trying, is to get a partnership with an aluminium company. I think that, you know, we know they are genuinely interested in what we're doing, but a partnership would, you know, help us both financially and also illustrate to the market that we really know what we're doing.
Gotcha. And just one to finish up, a probing question here for you. Is a potential demerger of the Alcohol business from the rare earths business something the board would consider or is considering?
Well, it's certainly something we've probably always considered, or it's always, there as an option. I think it does make sense. They do make more sense apart eventually, right? Like, if they both were commercialized, you go, well, why are they together? It's something we're probably going to give more. The right time is when at least one of them has really got significant momentum, and it's our plans would be that both projects would have achieved that in the next 12 months. You have a well-performing pilot plant and a rare earth resource with a good cost estimates and a clear path to commercialization. It'd be more reasonable to say they both stand on their own 2 feet, and it might make more sense for them to be separate.
Mark, great to have you back on again. Clearly significant process since we last spoke, and we wish you all the best for the future. Thanks again.
Great. Thanks, Paul.